Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the State of Kentucky, our weekly show. We've got some guests today, and we're looking forward to hearing what they have to say. Let me share a couple of things with you before we get into some of the topics for today. First of all, we want to remind you again of the state's coronavirus website, kycovid19.ky.gov. As we've said, it would be it's a really good site and has a lot of good information there, and we're going to continue to add resources. I mean, they're going to continue to add resources as we go. Another thing for you to remember is that we have our own page. I want to put this up and let you see it. This is the Forward Kentucky Coronavirus page that we have put up. It has a number of resources on it right now, but we're going to be adding some resources to it later. Let me show you a couple of things that are on it. We have some of the resources from the state, as you can see there. And then we've added some other resources. We are doing summaries of Governor Beshear's updates every day, so you can go back and look at those. This coronavirus simulator from Washington Post is really interesting and helps explain why we have to do the social distancing. And then the Coronavirus Explained is a good video that's about 8 minutes long. It's animated, but it does a great job of explaining what the coronavirus is and what it does to your body if you get it, and how it spreads. So I would encourage you to take a look at those resources for you. Let me take that back off. The other thing I want to remind you about is that we have comments. If you comment on Facebook, and it actually is on YouTube as well. Last week we had some YouTube comments. If you comment on Facebook or YouTube, we can see them, and we might actually display them in the broadcast. And of course, that's a good way to ask questions of our guests. So we would encourage you to participate that way as well. So one of our guests today is Secretary of State Michael Adams. He is, of course, newly elected last fall. And just like most people have been saying about Governor Beshear, a pandemic was not part of the plan. But we are thankful that we have his leadership as well as the governor's. And we've got him on here today to talk to us about mail-in voting. So let me bring him on right now. Secretary of State, Michael,
hi there.
Welcome to Kentucky.
Hi, can you see and hear me okay?
I see you just fine and hear you just fine.
Wonderful. Glad to be here.
Good to have you. So let me ask you a couple of questions, or let me begin asking you some questions about this. Obviously, the social distancing thing makes elections a little difficult, and you have already pushed the primary election out some. So I've heard these rumors that you're thinking about mail-in voting. So let me ask you, on a scale of 1 to 3, are you discussing mail-in voting? Are you seriously considering it? Or are you going to do it?
Well, I actually have a work group call here in a couple of hours. I've had nonstop consultations with county clerks from around the state of both parties, certainly with my own staff, with folks in Washington, in the federal government, with my colleagues who are secretaries of state in other states, Democratic and Republican around the country, over the last couple of weeks. And let me tell you where we are. My expectation is in the next week we'll announce a plan. We're not ready to announce it yet, but I can tell you on the scale of 1 to 10, the likelihood of having an expansion of mail-in voting is pretty high number. The question is, what laws, if any, would need to change to enable us to do that? Right. And if so, how do we get that done with an aborted legislative session? So I've already been in consultation with the legislature asking for some more flexibility. The governor and I agreed 11 days ago to delay the election, and we agreed on 2 things. A, we needed more time to assess what changes, if any, to make to our system in case we can't have a normal election. We want to ensure we have an election and that as many people can participate as possible while still remaining safe. And also, the nice thing about a delay is it gave us time to assess if these steps would be necessary. So we're not going to change everything on a dime. We're only going to do what we have to do. But I'm very sensitive about the fact that we've had poll workers. By the way, in our state, the average age of a poll worker is 65, which of course is right in the heart of the class who are most at risk today with this virus. So we're very sensitive to the fact that we have already, prior to this pandemic, had a poll worker crisis, trouble recruiting enough poll workers. So in light of that fact, we're concerned about having enough polling locations, and we're concerned about having the ability to socially distance our voters from our election officials.
Sure.
So I think it's highly likely you're going to see significant changes. The question is, do they need to be done legislatively, or do we have the freedom and flexibility to implement those ourselves? And so those are the things that we're looking at right now. I think we'll know more in about a week or two.
Well, that was one of the questions I had, was whether you needed legislative approval. I've looked at some of the voting laws, and I'm wondering if you and the State Board of Elections can just do this.
Well, we're having the State Board of Elections attorneys look at that. My staff and I are looking at that as well. There is some vagueness in our emergency powers law. The emergency power of the governor and me to move the election allows the State Board of Elections to establish procedures for election officials to follow. That's a direct quote. My view as an attorney in this field, I've practiced election law at the state and national level for many years. And my view is that a procedure is the path that an official follows, but it's merely procedural permission. It's not a substantive permission to change other laws. For example, who does and doesn't qualify for an absentee ballot. So I've asked the legislators of both parties for some freedom to give us the ability to respond to this unique situation. And so I think it's very possible that in the next week or two, you'll see legislation. And if they don't grant that to us, we'll work within the laws as we can. Certainly, you'll see me through this position actively encouraging people who can vote absentee to vote absentee. Sure. We do have a exception for people because of, quote, age. There's no specific age in the statute. It's just age. If you're of an age where you think that there's a threat to your health, or the health of others based on this pandemic, then I'm going to encourage you to vote early by mail.
You say you've talked to Governor Beshear about this. Does he approve of trying to do this? Does he support it?
Well, I've had an initial conversation with the governor. He was very open to my suggestions and asked me to go back and assess and get the facts and come back. And so that's what we're in the process of doing.
Okay. Oregon, of course, has been doing this statewide since 1998 and to pretty good success. I was looking, their turnout in their last election, I think, was 80 or 85%, something like that. Have you talked with them yet about how they do it?
Well, I'm familiar with their process. I have spoken with Washington State Secretary of State, who is a Republican in a vote-by-mail state. The advice that she offers is it's very difficult to scale up quickly to 100% vote by mail. Typically, when a state does this, they change their laws. There's a transition period. There's appropriations to the local officials to pay for the cost, which is a higher cost when you're factoring in postage, especially return postage. So there's no poll tax on a voter to have to pay for a stamp. So there's a lot of logistics to this. Two things primarily. Number one, this assumes that the post office is open. It also, which we don't know yet for this election, it also assumes that you're able to scale up quickly and get the ballots printed. They require a certain type of paper. There are only so many vendors in our country who produce this, and certainly their demand is increased. It requires a certain type of envelope paper. It's got to be thick enough that you can't see through the envelope and see who somebody voted for. Obviously, we want to respect the secret ballot. And also, the USPS has their own approval process. They will not carry absentee ballots unless they have in advance approved the specs of the envelopes.
Right.
So we're in consultation with the USPS too. So there's a lot of moving parts with this. Another issue that we have is we're in the midst of a federal lawsuit over our voter rolls not being adequately maintained. Before I took office, they haven't been maintained according to a consent decree that my office, before I was sworn in, signed off on. Some 8 to 10% of our voter file is inaccurate. So I'm very hesitant to simply mail ballots out to every person who's on our rolls, because we know it's undisputed that a significant number of our voters are on the ballot not legally. So I don't think that we can simply mail out ballots to every person who's in the database, but I do think what we can allow for is an absentee ballot process where we enable this, make it easier through an online mechanism for you to register and get your ballot mailed to you. So I think whether or not the law changes, we've got some flexibility to do this. It's a question of how much, and whatever we can't find under current law, we'll ask for from the legislature.
Okay. So one of the things that I think is interesting, though, about this, you had recently come out for paper ballots, or not, paper ballots, basically voter marked paper ballots, and of course, vote by mail achieves that. So that would be a positive, it would seem to me, and would help you achieve that.
I think it's a positive for lots of reasons. The legislation that I supported would transition us to paper ballots over time. It wouldn't be an immediate mandate. To me, it's not fair for us to demand that the counties immediately change their systems.
Sure.
They have to go out and buy scanners that are not cheap. They would have to go out and engage in these printing costs. So fortunately, I think we have got a little bit more flexibility for this primary because there's federal funding available, emergency funding that we can apply for and receive that will help ease the cost of moving to this sort of approach for this primary. But on a permanent basis, what I really want our counties to do, all 120 of them, is move toward a paper ballot system. I spent 2 years campaigning around the state, and I found that among Democrats, among Republicans, independents, libertarians even that I met, there was universal support for moving us to a paper ballot system.
Oh, yeah.
The left is concerned largely about hacking of our electronic systems, our electronic voting machines from foreign actors. The right are concerned about vote fraud. And they think that electronic machines are more susceptible to that. So this is a way, I think, to increase confidence in our system. It also gives us something that fewer people are talking about, but more should, which is, what if there's no fraud or concern of fraud in the first place, or hacking or any of that, or interference whatsoever, but you do have a very close race? How is it that you do a competent recanvass or a recount if you can't actually have a paper trail to go back and double check the count?
Right. All true. So since you're still working on putting this together, I'm sure you can't really explain all the pieces about how it would work. When you said you think you'll have some proposal in about a week?
Yeah, I think so. I think in the next week to 10 days. We moved the election by 5 weeks, which in theory gives us 5 weeks, but we really don't have that much time. I think really in the next 3 weeks max, we're going to have to make a firm decision about what we're going to do, because that's going to leave us only so much time to be able to get the ballots printed if that's the path that we take. I think the likeliest outcome that you'll see is some limited in-person voting. I think I won't say it's out of compliance with federal law, but it's a little dicey to move very suddenly to a vote-by-mail system because of the ADA. I don't want a situation where people who are not able to get to the post office to buy stamps suddenly aren't able to vote. I want to ensure that we have a way for them to vote. And so at the very least, we probably need to have some sort of limited in-person voting for people who have a disability. So I'd like to not eliminate in-person voting entirely, unless, of course, it's just simply not safe. What you saw in Ohio very recently, they had their primary, and the governor came in and shut it all down through the health department under his administration because it just wasn't safe. I think, I won't speak for Governor Beshear. I think if he faces the sort of threat that he thinks we might face, then he might be inclined to do the same thing. Certainly, we shouldn't be having in-person voting if the situation is that bad in late June. My hope is that it won't be. But regardless, even if nothing changes, or even if things change in a positive direction, my expectation is going to be a lot of voters are not going to participate if they're in fear of going out in public. And so we certainly need at least an expanded option for them to vote absentee.
So even though we can't necessarily move to a full vote by mail, which is obvious, it might be an option for some people to ask for even after the coronavirus crisis. Yeah,
we have a number of reasons you can vote absentee as it is. On average, about 2% of voters vote by mail. The vast majority of voters show up on election day. I don't think that you'll see that this time for a couple of reasons. One is that the primary is in June. June is when a lot of families go on vacation. I certainly hope that by late June we'll be back to normal and people can go have vacations with their families. But summer's a time that people tend to have lower participation in elections. That's why most states don't have their primaries in the summertime. Certainly not as late as late June. So our primaries tend to have pretty low turnout anyway. We don't have a lot of competitive races on our primary ballot at the federal level. The presidential race, the Senate race are not seen as competitive. We've got local races. We've got races for legislature, some primaries that are competitive. Unfortunately, I think we'll have probably low turnout anyway. And of course, this being in the summer and having a pandemic doesn't help. So for us to have an adequate participation, I think it's important that at the very, very least, even if the law does not change, that we exercise the flexibility that we have within the law, and that my office and others actively encourage people that if they qualify to vote absentee, that they should.
Good. Secretary of State Adams, I'm sure it is crazy busy for you and your team. We look forward to the proposal you come out with. We certainly are looking forward to being able to use that flexibility. And good luck as you move forward, and keep us apprised.
Thanks so much. Good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
That was Secretary of State Michael Adams talking to us about vote by mail and possibilities of that coming soon. We'll look forward to see what they come up with in the next week or so, and what happens with that. And of course, one of the things that vote by mail will give us is the ability to vote for whichever candidate we wish for certain races. And one of the races we're all watching is the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate. We had Michael Breuer on last week, and we are fortunate to have Representative Charles Booker with us this week, one of our favorite folks, and we're glad to see him there. And of course, he's taking advantage of the visual here of having the banner and the whole 9 yards there. Representative Booker, good to have you with us.
How you doing, my friend? It's good to see you. Hope you're staying safe, brother.
Oh, we're trying. We're certainly trying. We've gone through every game in the house, I do believe. So let me ask you some obvious questions, but the one I always start with is, how's the campaign going overall?
Well, it's going incredibly well. I'm so humbled to be on this journey, even during the legislative session. And the response has really been one that lets me know that we can win this moment. Even in the face of this pandemic, there are so many folks that have reached out saying, how can I help? We're at home. There's not a whole lot we can do. How can we get involved? And so people are phone banking from their homes. We've had hundreds of volunteers making calls, hit over 9,000 people this week, actually in the past couple of hours yesterday. And wow. So we're doing the work, and I think it's one of those moments where, yes, nobody likes Mitch McConnell, but so many Kentuckians have their back against the wall, and they're feeling the pressure of needing to fight back. And this is the chance to do it, the campaign to do it, and I'm excited.
Obviously, things have changed. Everybody I talk to is sort of scrambling. I've been on some conference calls lately with people talking about, how do we campaign? How do we show activism? How do we do that with the pandemic and the social distancing? So how are you doing it? What are you doing to campaign now that we're social distanced?
Yeah, well, this actually is something that I've been thinking about before the pandemic. And now it's much more urgent for all of us, which is a good thing for democracy, is you have to meet people where they are. We got to break down these barriers and make it easier for folks to get involved. And I think folks seeing this health crisis is making people think about, well, how do we do things differently? We were already doing that. We were already building tools so folks could organize where they're at, set up virtual events, become ambassadors for the campaign, do phone banking from their homes, send out text messages to their groups with information that we regularly send them out. These are all things we were already doing. And so now with a pandemic, unlike what we've seen, at least in the past century, it's shining a bright light on the reality that we need more people to feel like their voice matters, and we got to do things differently. And so we actually just released a memo a couple of days ago talking about how we're beefing up our operations digitally, online, remotely. And I think moving forward, we're going to have to keep doing more things like that. But I look forward to being able to get back on some doors and in person more events too. Hopefully, leadership at the state level is been incredible. So proud of our governor. Mitch McConnell has been absent. Hopefully, there can be some pressure at the federal level. We're working here to do our part so we can get some relief and get past this and get back outside. But in the meantime, we're crushing it, man. We're doing the work.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What, as you're going about this process, what's your campaign staff telling you? Obviously, there's always the everybody loves you, which is what every candidate hears from their staff.
Yeah.
But what are you hearing in terms of numbers or comments or anecdotes or anything you can share?
Well, the big thing that we're seeing is from all of our engagement, we have so much support on the ground. And this is something that, I expected coming in from work in the legislature, working across the Commonwealth, as Director of Fish and Wildlife, doing all these different things, building these relationships. But seeing the support on the ground from folks that typically don't get heard is the most inspiring thing. And it's the thing that national media is not going to be thinking about. The polls are not going to be reflecting. But having Kentuckians for the Commonwealth come out and endorse with their statewide infrastructure of a whole lot of regular people that just want things to change, we're still seeing that excitement. And, when we call folks, there is a reality. Everybody's making life adjustments. This is a tough time.
Yeah.
But to see that folks are still so inspired, and the response has essentially been that, you know what, this pandemic has made it even clearer why we need leadership in the Senate that actually gives a damn about us. And so, Charles, we're in. And so it's something that, we're excited to surprise a lot of people with.
Good. Last week we had Mike Breuer on, and he was talking about traveling. He doesn't have the same time commitment that you do, being in Frankfurt. And so he's, across the state and various meetings, so on and so forth. How are you handling that, considering that you also have to be in Frankfurt for sessions, although it's less than before?
Yeah, well, nowadays, very few of us are doing much extensive traveling. But, but before this, we, during the session, before and after, we're traveling. And we've touched every part of Kentucky. We have ambassadors in every region of the state. We've had support from every county. And, a lot of this, too, for me, has been a continuation of my work. Coming into the state legislature, I was very intentional on reaching out into the Commonwealth and breaking down these silos. There's representing a district in Louisville, you have Louisville and then the rest of the state in a lot of respects.
Right.
But the fallacy in that is the idea that we're not fighting the same battle. From the west end of Louisville, I could show you a picture and you'd swear it's Appalachia. And so I've been very intentional about trying to break those barriers down and make it clear that we're in this together. And so we've been working hard, man. I've racked up a lot of miles. I've gone through a pair of shoes, and it's worth it. And, people ask me, how do I do it? I just don't get a lot of sleep.
Yeah, right. So let me follow up on that. The comparison with Appalachia and West Louisville and being able to tell that story.
Yeah.
When you've been in East Kentucky, and I know you have been, and you talk about that, does it resonate? Do those people does it kind of go, oh yeah, I guess we have more in common than we thought?
Yeah, no, it's been the most powerful experience. And I'm so grateful for it, because when you do sit down and you have conversations, and I'll talk about, my mom working multiple jobs just so we could struggle, and job leaving, and folks being stranded without resources, and being a type 1 diabetic, having to ration insulin, nearly dying from that. And when I share those stories, the response is always, wow, I know what that's like. Thank you for doing that. In fact, I do believe we can do something different. And I've met with Trump supporters, all over the political spectrum. And my message is very populist. It's very people powered. It's beyond the politics. And folks respect it. It's refreshing. Speaking with moral clarity on issues of racism, inequity, and not backing down on them, but still seeing people for their humanity. It's the work that we have to do in the Commonwealth. And I'm proud be leading the campaign to get it done.
When are you going to be on an event, even a virtual event, with McGrath and or Breuer and or Hilliard anytime in the future? Is anything scheduled?
I have not seen anything scheduled yet. I think everybody's been scrambling to try to make adjustments because there were a lot of events that, were canceled because of COVID-19. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get some of those things going soon. I'm doing live events on all social media platforms myself to stay connected with folks. I'm going to do virtual town halls and all of those things to keep pushing issues out there. But I do hope that we can have something with all of the candidates, which does include Amy McGrath, because there is a primary. And folks need to know that there's a chance to choose someone that's not going to run from Mitch McConnell's playbook, and a chance to choose someone that is not just going to show up now with new political thoughts, but that has been on the ground working. We have a chance to fight and choose what we want for our future. And so I'm hopeful for that. I'll be there when it happens.
Right. There's a question that I always ask candidates. It's my standard closing question. But before I get to that, let me ask you, was there anything I didn't ask you that you really wanted to answer?
Well, you didn't ask me about our incredible news today.
Okay, go for it.
I got a big endorsement this morning from Income Movement, which they're part of the group that have been championing fighting for universal basic income.
Right.
And this is a big deal for me. It's something I've been pushing for years, and reaching out to Mayor Tubbs in California because they have their pilot project. We've been trying to get a coalition together here. And so that's really big because it speaks to the system level change that I believe and many Kentuckians are demanding that we see right now, that, poverty is generational, and how do we end it? How do we make sure folks have resources, especially now? And I think this, pandemic has really let folks see that, we need to help people because the bottom is falling out. And you know what? Where I'm from in 40203, the bottom fell out. Our unemployment has already been around 30%. We already have folks homeless and jobs leaving, and we know what it looks like. And so that endorsement was a big affirmation that, we've been doing the work and people see it.
Cool. So let's wrap up. I know you're busy and you've got campaign and session and family and all that stuff. So I'm going to ask you go ahead.
Said state budget, just a little bit going on.
Yeah, nothing, just the budget. So the question I always ask a candidate to close out an interview is, you're standing on my porch talking to me. Of course, you're 6 feet away now. And tell me, why should I vote for you?
Well, I'm standing here to say that we need to win our future. I'm running because I see you. I hear you. I'm honoring your humanity now. And we need someone that's going to fight for us and not against us. Yes, we don't like Mitch McConnell, but once he's gone, we have so much work to do that we need someone that knows how to get in there, build coalitions, and get work done so that we can win our future. That's what I've been doing as a legislator. It's what I've been doing across Kentucky. And it's being shown in our campaign now by having thousands of volunteers already coming in, hundreds of folks making calls over the past couple of days during the pandemic, and building the infrastructure that not only means we'll beat Mitch McConnell, but we'll have more folks activated and inspired. We need a person now that can say, what are we for? What are we leading on? What do we believe in? Not just is Mitch McConnell bad? Sure he is. Yes, he's the Grim Reaper, but what are we going to do for our families? That's my life story, and that's why we're going to win.
Cool. Representative Charles Booker running for the Democratic nomination for Senate. We really appreciate you being here with us. We hope to have you on again sometime.
Of course.
And good luck with your campaign, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Washing hands, bookerforkentucky.com. Make sure everyone knows.
Bookerforkentucky.com and wash your hands. That's a good closing message. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, my friend.
That was Representative Charles Booker, state rep in Frankfort, who's running for the Senate nomination. We really appreciate him being with us today and taking time out of his busy schedule. We also appreciate Secretary of State Michael Adams being with us earlier to talk about vote by mail. A couple of final things. On our website, forwardky.com, we have taken down the paywall. And so even if you're not a member, you can read all of the stories there that you want without any paywall problems. We are asking people if they can to become members, because that's how we are supported. We have put up a coronavirus resource page. And I'll just as a teaser throw out that Aaron Smith, who's been busy lately, has gotten us a new editorial cartoon. It is up on the site. And if you haven't followed Aaron's work before, even if you have, you probably want to go check out that cartoon. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next Friday. Bye-bye.